Greetings and welcome. I'm Mr. McGee, and this is a lecture that is the first of 4 lectures that will introduce you to room 303. The objective here is pretty simple. I want to make sure that at the very beginning of a semester that you understand what the rules and the expectations are in regards to our class, what the rhythms are of room 303. Now the first thing you want to do right now is for sure pick out a sheet of paper and a writing utensil, because you're going to do what we call flow this lecture and the 3 to follow that will be posted both on YouTube as well as LearnStrong.net. You want to pay attention, of course, to the information that I'm presenting to you. If you need to, rewind or whatever, that's always a good idea as well. We will have a 303 exam. It will actually be the first exam that you will take, and as such, you will want to be sure you're preparing for that exam by watching these 4 lectures. Let me give you a suggested way to study these 4 lectures. The first suggestion is that you do not just sit down and watch all 4 of them in one sitting. It's going to be way too much information. It's going to probably be a little bit overwhelming. So I recommend that what I'm going to recommend actually that you do when you are studying normally, and that is to study in bursts of 10 minutes. In other words, go for about 10 minutes, hit the pause button, take a little minute break and then come back. Maybe even review what it is that you've written down so you can start to get some sense of the organization of these lectures. We're going to try as much as possible then to focus during these lectures, and we're going to try and conquer what we will later talk about as conquering monkey mind. I'll have a little more to say about that here in a little bit. I really would like it if you could have your significant other parent watch these lectures with you. It makes sense that you would do that. They need to know what's going on as well as you, so that the 2 of you, you and your significant other parent, can work together with me to accomplish successful learning. I want to be sure that as well you understand that if you are able to demonstrate that your parents watch these lectures, they will write a little note that says what lecture or lectures they watched and sign it. And if you bring that to me before the day of the exam, then I can actually give you plus points on your test sheet, something that we'll talk about more in detail in Lecture 2. Let's just give a quick overview so that you know what you're looking at. First of all, in this lecture, I'm going to introduce you to the basic logistics, expectations, rules of room 303. There will be a few handouts that you will have already possibly received in class as hard copy, but if you're looking for them, they should be posted as well on the homepage of LearnStrong.net. In the second lecture, we're going to talk more specifically about master scheduling and organization. It is one of the central keys to success in 303. In the third lecture, we're going to talk about all of the reading that we will do in here, what we will call annotation. And then finally, in Lecture 4, we'll talk about the writing that's required of us in our time here. We'll talk about the 2 primary state standards of reading and writing improvement. The focus for 303 is on learning, and so I want you to write that down right away. Any time that we're involved in work in 303, we want to be able to say that this work is contributing to student learning. We will define learning not as memorization, memorizing lots of garbage or whatever, but we will define learning as the ability to connect new information to old information. When you are learning a new concept, and you're able to say about that new concept, oh, I get it, this idea you're trying to teach me is kind of like something I already know, what we call prior knowledge. That is the ability that I call learning, the ability to relate new information to old information in meaningful ways. That is to say, you can actually use the information that you are learning. As I've already mentioned, our 2 state standards are reading improvement and writing improvement. We'll, of course, talk about reading improvement in Lecture 3, writing improvement in Lecture 4. Let's get, though, to the central rule of room 303 right away, and it's what I call simply the respect rule. The idea here is really simple. We do have a rules sheet. You will have, as a student, looked at it and signed it. You will have shown it to your significant other parent. He or she will look at it and sign it. And it is available as well on LearnStrong on the homepage. But I just want to point out that this rules sheet, all of those rules can ultimately be reduced down to a single rule, and that is what we will call the respect rule. That is to say, we're always wanting to show respect. That is to say, give proper value to the 3 groups that kind of make up the learning community. Think about this for a moment with me, and I hope that you're writing this down as you flow. ostensibly there's three groups that have to work together for us to have any kind of real learning taking place in 303. First, you have to have respect for yourself. Self-respect is crucial. And think about this. By extension, you are showing respect to the people who have raised you, the people who you live with within the community of Worland. And to that degree, when you show self-respect, you show respect and honor the community that has produced you. Or at least the community that you grow in now, you live in now. Second of all, you have to have respect for the students in room 303. We ask that you are always showing each person in this room who is a student proper value, proper respect. And think about that. By extension then, you're kind of showing respect to who the students in 303 actually represent. That is to say, the student body. Regardless of class, regardless of any other kind of distinctions, we're always showing respect. And then finally, we will expect that there be respect shown to the teacher and, of course, very importantly, by Mr. McGee, the teacher, as well. And think about this. By extension, of course, when you're showing respect to Mr. McGee, you're not only showing respect to me, but to all the instructors at Worland High School, of course, the administrators, the superintendent, the school board as well. Now, to violate this respect rule, and it's important that you understand this, it could mean failure from this course. So, okay, I take this very, very seriously. I go back to what I often refer to as the Bryan story. And when I was in high school many, many years ago, I had a friend, and he was brilliant, artist type, but very quiet. One day, he actually spoke up in class. Didn't happen at all. And from the back of the room, do you know people like this? They have to make fun to make themselves feel better. And started sniggering, laughing. And Bryan never spoke again in class. And I swore at a very early part of my teaching career that I would make sure that the students in room 303 are protected. We will never make fun of the students in here. We'll never humiliate. I will never try to humiliate or make fun of you, and I will expect you to show the same level of respect. That's not to say, by the way, that we don't have a good time in 303. We laugh a lot, but we make sure that we always are keeping proper respect. This, of course, is as well why we don't cheat. Of course, our cheating policy is an important one in 303. If you cheat, you could fail, not only for the single bit of work, but also you could fail for the quarter and even for the semester. But think about it. The reason why we don't cheat is because when you cheat, you somehow devalue all three of those learning community parts: yourself, your colleagues, and of course, by extension, of course, the instructor and the administration of Worland High School. So we want to make sure that we understand how to survive the experience of 303 and then even gain more than just survive to be successful. Let's talk about it for a moment. I like word pictures, and so I'll use several. One of the word pictures that I often talk about is the feeling of being in multiple waves that start to hit you as the workload starts to come down. That reminds me of many years ago. My wife had never been to the ocean, and so I said, come on, we'll go to the ocean. So I took her to the ocean. She was a good swimmer, but she was kind of freaked out. She walked out into the ocean. I was kind of in front of her in the wave. I said, come on, it'll be fun. And the first wave hit her and kind of knocked her off balance a little bit. And the second wave hit her, and she started falling backwards. And then the third wave hit her, and all I saw were her feet sticking out of the water. And she was not pleased initially, with this. And I would say, oftentimes that's the way some students feel as they come into room 303. They start unsure of what's going on, and then all of a sudden the first wave hits them, and they get a little unbalanced. And then by the third wave, they're drowning. The goal of these tutorials, these videos that you're watching and flowing, is to try to help you know the work that's coming. The other word picture that I like is, imagine John back there, for example. He's a fairly large young man, you would all agree, and he walks out into the hall with me. I say, John, out in the hall, hurry. He goes out in the hall. He's like, geez, what did I do this time? And I say, no, you're not in trouble. Here's the deal, dude. I'm going to give you this large aluminum bat. You know the kind of bats that we use in softball in the summer? And I'm going to ask you to stand outside my door, and I'm going to let guys out of here one at a time. And if they go left, I want you to pop them really hard with the bat, but if they go right, leave them alone. And I come back in and I say, hey guys, you know what, John, I decided to send him home. In fact, I'm going to send all you guys home early. Why don't you guys go ahead and get out of here? And I'm going to let you go one at a time. Dave, you get to go first. Yeah, I know, not a real nice thing, right? But How about this if I came back in and said, listen, here's the thing, John's standing outside with a large bat. Don't go left, because you're going to get blitzed by that bat, go right. Now, if you'll think about it in metaphor, your whole life you've had people trying to tell you, don't go left, go right. And sometimes we've listened, sometimes we haven't listened. Much of the instruction of this video and then the ones to follow is to suggest, hey, if you know what's coming, you have a much better opportunity to be successful. So I'll be outlining it as we go. The first thing is to understand the rhythms of the class. You'll want to write that down. In other words, what is it that's expected? We're going to use an important word in here. Our word is intentional. That is to say, with purpose. So we're always going to have some kind of purpose to the work that we're doing. If you can ever come to Mr. McGee and say, I don't understand the purpose for any of this work that you're assigning to me, and I can't give you a legitimate reason why that makes you go, oh, okay, I get it, then we just stop doing it. And I mean that. We'll just stop doing it. We'll no longer do that work. With that in mind, then, we'll talk a little bit about the real goal here is to be intentional so that ultimately we can be random, especially, that is to say, problem solving and being creative. I'm a real believer that if we're intentional on the front end, then we can be very creative, very random in our conversations and in our creative work, both in speaking as well as writing. Of course, it's crucial that we want to understand the value of the course outline. Now, of course, you received a course outline the very first day of class. Of course, you can always access a copy of the outline on LearnStrong as well. Our course outline, very important. It lists all of the major work that is scheduled for our semester, and we'll have more to say about this in lecture 2. Ultimately, you are going to create what we will call a master schedule. We'll talk more about this in lecture 2, and you're going to want to make sure that you are paying very close attention to the master schedule. Everything about what we do in room 303 is driven by this master schedule. Let's talk real quickly about the 2 student groups of room 303. There's actually 2 groups of us that come into 303 to study with Mr. McGee. The first group is what we call the no-fail group. That's the NF group, the no-fail group. And this is a group that comes in that says, this is a student who says to Mr. McGee, hey, listen, here's the deal. I appreciate all this work that you're giving to me and everything, but I cannot fail this class. And to that degree, I just want to make sure that I get my percentage point of 60, which is passing at Worland High School, and I pass this class. To do that, then I guarantee you that you will pass this class at least with a 60 if, 1, you want to write this down, you got to come to class. Attendance is crucial. If you're absent all the time, I can't pass you if you're not in here. 2, of course, our respect rule. You got to show respect at all time. 3, this group understands that most of the work of 303 will actually be done in class. Okay, not a lot of out-of-class homework for this group, but periodically may have to come into class for some additional help, either before school, during lunch, after school. This we call Dadless Club. We'll have more to talk about that in a little bit. That's our first group. And there are always students who simply come into 303 and say to Mr. McGee, look, here's the deal, I just need to make sure I pass. Can you take care of it? And I say, with your help, yes, we can make sure that happens. The second group says, I appreciate the no-fail group. We'll never make fun of the no-fail group. We'll never call them losers or idiots or dumb or stupid or any of that. But I'm not part of that group. I need a score of at least a 70 or higher. That is our ABC group, which is to say, we need to make sure that we are trying to get a higher grade than a D. This group understands then right away, and this is crucial, you want to write it down in your flowing notes. This will mean then that you, if you are part of the ABC group, you will be doing homework outside of class. That's crucial, and you need to understand it right away. But here's the deal. Mr. McGee has to have evidence. We will talk about assessment often in 303, and all that means, it's a fancy word that simply means we have to have evidence that you are doing these 2 state standards of reading and writing. In other words, what we mean by this is, it's not enough for me to assign a story for you to read, and then you come back and say, dude, I read it. Way wrong answer. I have to have evidence that you read it. Well, one way I could do that is to actually sit and watch you read it, or I could read it with you, correct? But a lot of times I just don't have that time available, neither do you. So we have to have some kind of evidence that you've done the reading, And you could say, Mr. McGee, I wrote this stuff and I just, I left it. Way wrong answer. I've got to have evidence that you've actually done the work. We have several different ways then that we will provide this evidence so that we can be sure that we are legitimately passing the class in room 303. The first kind of evidence, assessments, is what we will call the reading writing assessment packets. We'll have more to say about this once a week. This packet will be turned in. Of course, number 2, we'll have exams that you'll take after the texts have been studied. We use what we'll call the test sheet. We'll hear more about this in a while, to keep a tally of all your points for the exam. We also have a couple of other computer-driven types of testing. We do what's called AR testing, or accelerated reader. That happens here at school. And a program that we use called MyAccess, which is a writing software program. It scores your writing. It's a way for us to make sure that you are receiving lots of different types of feedback for the writing that you do. And all of that's part of our assessments. Now, we have other kinds of record keeping that's fairly important in room 303. Of course, the most important is what we call the Omega file. You received one on the very first day of class. Let's make a couple of quick observations that you'll write down about the Omega. The first is that it never does leave room 303. It stays in the Omega file drawer there at the back of the room. Okay. And it's here that at the beginning of class you'll always pick up your Omega file. There's no assigned seating, and so you go and sit anywhere you want. When the bell rings, I have the opportunity to know who's absent by virtue of who's in the Omega file. If I'm handing out papers, that's where they go. Again, the Omega never leaves the room. Anytime you're going to hand work into me, you'll always make sure then that you're turning it in through the Omega file, and then once in the Omega file will go not into the drawer, but into what we call the gray bin, which sits right above the file cabinet for the Omega drawer itself. Okay? And this is ostensibly the way that Mr. McGee and you will communicate. Okay, so I'll talk with you through the Omega file. So you'll never come up to me and hand me a sheet of paper. Whoa, 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 way wrong answer. I can lose stuff too easy. You're going to go ahead and you're going to put it in an Omega file and then kick it to me that way. All right? Inside of the Omega file, we did this on day 1, we staple what we call an Omega record sheet. And all that means is every time that there is any kind of a score that will go in the grade book or on Infinite Campus, we as a student will always record on the Omega record sheet that score. The advantage here is that at any given point in our semester, we can do what we call run our numbers. That is to say, we do an average. So for example, if you've got 10 scores on the Omega record sheet, you add them all up, you divide by 10, you're going to get a score between 0 and 100, and then our grading scale obviously applies. One of the things I want to remind you, though, and it's important, especially if you're new to Worland High School, you're a freshman or whatever, is to remind you that the quarter 1 average is added to the quarter 2 average to derive your semester 1 average, and then of course quarter 3, quarter 4 the same way. In other words, the only thing Worland High School uses for scoring at the front office on transcripts is a letter grade, and that letter grade, they make no distinctions between an 88 and an 81, for example. That letter grade will just be a B. Okay, so it's significant that as you go through your semester and you're running your numbers, if you're trying to get to the next highest grade, you need to kind of understand where the numbers work there, okay? Other kinds of record keeping. I mentioned it already, let's talk about it. Infinite Campus. It's a really important piece of technology for us. You need to know your password. Your significant other parent needs to know password. You're constantly referencing that, and here's why. Anytime that I score material for you, I always will put that score in the form of a percentile in Infinite Campus. But here's the deal. I thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. You get the joke. And so you're always wanting to check me to make sure, Mr. McGee, you put a score of 60 in, and actually it was a score of 80. Now here's the deal. I can change that if you have written evidence, okay, that I actually gave you a score of 80. Mr. McGee, you gave me a score of 80 and you recorded a score of 60. I'm sorry, that's a mistake on my part. Show me your test sheet where I recorded 80. Oh, I already threw the test sheet away. I'm sorry, the score's got to remain as it is. Oh no, I have the test sheets because I never throw anything away until the end of semesters. Oh great, show me the test sheet. I'm very sorry, couldn't read my own handwriting. It's been said before, and we take care of it that way. Now, I've mentioned this test sheet several times. You can see a sample copy on LearnStrong. Of course, you saw one on the very first day. This is the way we keep record of all of our work for the exams. We set a new test sheet up after every exam has been finished to start to get ready for the new exam. We'll have a 303, for example, logistics exam, and we will have a test sheet for that one as well. When you mark on your own test sheet, you will always use blue or black ink. When your student grader marks on your test sheet, always in red ink. And when Mr. McGee marks on any of your work, it is always with green ink. Green ink for room 303 is reserved only for me, all right? Here's the deal. If there's ever a question, you got to ask me right away. You need to write this down in your flowing. It is your responsibility to keep track of your scores, your grades. That is not my job. That is not your parents' job alone. Remember, we're a community. First and foremost, though, in terms of that, your job first and foremost, which is why we have so many different kinds of ways to record. Let's talk about the rhythms of 303 real quickly, okay? What happens, for example, when you come through the door and you enter room 303? I've already mentioned, for example, no assigned seating. We do sit at communal tables, as you can see. There's two basic ways to think about the rhythms of 303. The first is a weekly rhythm, and then the second is a daily rhythm. Let's talk weekly first. It's an advantage to kind of know every week we have certain kind of expectations that happen every week for the entire semester. Of course, we always have text study. We're studying text. This is a class, a literature course, and so in humanities, and so we always are studying literature. We'll do that reading always in the form of what we call annotations. I'll talk more about that in Lecture 3. The other, of course, is what we have the reading, writing assessment packets, where you have some of your reading notes and some of your writing that will be put inside of a packet and handed in. Every week, at least once a week, you always do that so that you at least have one score for sure in the grade book. And of course, we always, as part of our weekly work, have a potential exam. We don't have an exam every week, though. Once we finish with a certain number of texts, then we exam. All right? In terms of daily work, now, you want to really start taking close notes now, because there are expectations here that I'm going to hold you accountable for as early as the end of week 1, okay, first full week. In terms of the daily work, our goal is to conquer monkey mind. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, students have a, typically they kind of understand that maybe the way their minds work is to say, okay, think of a monkey in a cage, not just any cage, a metal cage. And underneath the metal cage, there's a fire burning that heats up the cage so that at any given moment, this poor monkey's jumping around, touching the bars, and I'm getting burned and that kind of thing. But wait, I'm not done with this word picture. Then all of a sudden, the huge hornets come in and start stinging this poor monkey right over and over again. So now he's not only getting burned by the cage, but he's also getting stung. And then finally, somebody turns out the lights on this poor monkey. Now imagine for a moment that your mind is like this. Okay? This is not my word picture alone. We use it a lot, for example, with ball players as well. The idea is simply this. If we can open the window and let the hornets out, turn the light on, turn the fire off from down below the cage, and then open the door and let the monkey out the cage, that's what we're going to call concentration or focus. Sit in a classroom, for example, tomorrow or next time you're in a session, or if you're a ball player at the next practice. Stand back and just kind of watch and see how much talking is taking place when listening should be taking place. Okay? And what I would say about this is our job right away is to utilize our time as you enter room 303 right away. What we'll call time on task. It's such an important term for us. What does that mean? You come in, you grab your Omega file. Why do you do that? So you're not marked absent. You find a place to sit, you immediately sit down. Now there are two really important understandings because we have two different groups of students who come into 303. Remember our non-fail group and then of course our ABC group. We think about our hour as being divided now up into 3 parts. The first 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes, and then what happens in between. All right? In the first 10 minutes, the no-fail group, the NF group, is immediately going to grab a piece of paper from the recycle bin, unless he or she brought paper. Going to sit down with textbook, going to look at the whiteboard right away to see what the assignment is for today. Open textbook and set up annotation work, because the only annotations that the NF group will have are the annotations that are done in class, because remember, no work done outside of class for that group of students. The ABC group immediately will come into the room and will take out the homework from the previous night. Okay? Now there's 2 kinds of homework from the previous night. Okay? The first is going to be what we will call the annotations that you do. Pre-class annotations, we will call them. Okay? Now we'll have much more to say about this in the lectures to come. The second kind of homework is the video flowing. When these students go to learnstrong.net and actually will watch videos of the information of the texts that have been assigned. And they'll be flowing the lecture just like you guys are doing now, okay, flowing the lecture, all right? And so there will be notes that will be taken. And as the students come into class, the very first thing that they're going to do if they're ABC students is they're going to take out the information, they're going to put it inside of their Omega file along with their test sheet, because that's where we keep the records of work that's completed. And then going to bring that Omega file to the front of the room. Here at the front of the room, there's normally a table. That table will have two corners, all right? If all the work is complete that has been assigned, that is to say, the pre-class reading annotations done by you, the flowing of a lecture, if a lecture has been assigned, sometimes lectures are not assigned. If all that work is complete, then the students will set their Omega file on the left corner, as they're facing the table, on the left corner of the table. If some of that work is done, but not all of that work is done, that's what we call partial work, then you're going to set that on the right corner of the table, the Omega file. And then immediately return back to a chair, take out your notebook and your journal section of your notebook for writing, and then immediately go to silent writing. Okay? Normally we will have already told you what that is, or it'll be on the whiteboard, so that there should be absolutely no talking during the first 10 minutes of class. What does this allow Mr. McGee to do? Two things. One, I got to take care of roll. Right? Two, I'm going to study really quickly the Omega files at the front of the room. What's this going to tell me? Well, it's going to tell me where I will begin the second part of our time together. That's the middle third of our time together. And of course, we spend most of our time there, don't we? How much information do you already know? So for example, if I'm going to teach a text, and everybody's already read that text, and I'm going to know that by evidence. Remember, that's our assessment tool. I'm going to know that by evidence. Then I can start at one point. On the other hand, if I got a class of 20 students and I've got 3 Omega files sitting up on my table at the beginning of the hour, what that tells me is that I'm going to have to work with students now to just bring them up to speed. Now, in the middle third, along with scoring, obviously we're going to have to make sure that everybody gets on board. Oftentimes, if you are a student of the ABC group who has done all the completed work, we may turn you into what we call student mentors, and the student mentor's job will be to maybe talk with or through for about 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes other students who have not done the reading, just to bring them up to speed. Okay? Finally, we'll do some text study in the middle third. Bring out texts, we'll talk about them through an annotative process that I'll outline in lecture 3. Okay? In the final 10 minutes of class, and I normally will have a room captain assigned who will remind me when 10 minutes are remaining in class. It's his or her job to do this because I get into the middle of talking about text and I can forget. And you want to make sure that you let me know if you're the room captain, and then with 10 minutes roughly remaining, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to take care of any other test sheet points for the day, right? Checking off, for example, the NF students who have done the annotations in class, etc. And we'll also study what we call the master schedule. I have more to say about this in the second lecture. We're going to talk about what's due for tonight, what's due for tomorrow. That way you're never confused. That way you never have that sense of, yeah, I don't understand what I'm being asked to do. So we'll always do that. Master schedule review at the end of the hour. Again, I'll have more to say about that in lecture 2. Here's the thing. You need to write this down. You need to understand this. If you don't come to class prepared, in other words, having an Omega file at the front of my room when a bell rings, then immediately you become part of that NF group for that day, possibly for that exam, and possibly for that quarter or semester. So it's really important that you understand that if you want to receive a score higher than a 60 in room 303, there are responsibilities for you. And the most important is you come to class prepared. When the bell rings, you immediately have to submit your homework to me. You're not allowed to sit in class, do the homework, and then show it to me at the end of class for points. Way wrong answer. It's not the way it works. Again, that's the way it works if you want to be part of the NF group. But if you want to be part of the ABC group, you got to get the work done before you come to class. Let's talk real quickly about the help that you can receive in room 303. As I said, you're never alone. You're always here with other people. Let's talk for a few moments about this term that I used before, Dadless Club. You're probably familiar with this story. Dadless is this great inventor. He has this son named Icarus. They get stuck up, in this prison. Dadless invents these wings. He tells his boy Icarus, this is the way these wings will work, but be careful, don't fly too close to the sun because there's wax on the wings. Icarus is a young kid. Yeah, I got it, just give me the wings. He gets the wings, he jumps out, goes flying in the air. Boy, this sounds like one or two of us in our life, doesn't it? And totally forgets the dad's instruction and falls into the sea and dies. Sometimes Mr. McGee has to play Dadless to his Icarus students, and Dadless Club is just simply the invitation for you to come in and get extra help. Sometime in the mornings before school, Ruthie, our janitor, usually has my room open at 7:30, and you can always show up then to work. During lunch, you can come in for Dadless Club. If you're going to do that with me, you have to set up and prearrange. And then, of course, after school from 3:30 to 4:30, we have officially Dadless Club. You are expected to be here. Let's say, for example, that you are an NF student who does not get all of the work done in class. Then Mr. McGee could say to you, I need you here in class, and that would mean then after school, all right? So you need to understand that when I say you pass depending upon attendance, that doesn't just mean in class, it can mean as well to Dadless Club if you're needing it. All right, what's the key? The key is to ask for help. First of all, you can always ask a study buddy. You should declare a study buddy right now. These are people who you can trust who are sitting in this room now. What did I miss yesterday? I was gone. You never want to ask Mr. McGee that question if you have not asked first your study buddy. Okay? Then secondly, obviously, you want to make sure that you're referencing Mr. McGee. Now, how is it that I always know what's coming? The answer to that is simple. It's called the master schedule, and it's what we're going to talk about now in the second lecture. The master schedule for us is crucial to being able to be very intentional and therefore successful in our learning. Thank you.